From Clearance Solutions. This is the second podcast in our series looking at some of the psychological issues we encounter through our work. Today we're discussing bereavement and grief, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Mark Hamilton, founder of the Human Perspective, a therapy centre based in central London. Mark is a member of the British Psychological Society and has acted as a consultant for a number of organisations, including the United Nations. Good morning, Mark.
Hi, Rufus.
A lot of our clients are in the process of clearing their deceased parents or siblings' homes. It can be a particularly difficult process, and I think sometimes it comes as a bit of a surprise how difficult it is.
Mm-hmm.
Getting rid of someone's belongings really is, moving them on. And through the process, things can be discovered that might be touching or pertinent from childhood, a whole range of stuff. One of the things we try and do is to be aware and sympathetic towards people in this situation. So I just thought if we just have a look briefly at what the process of grief is, first of all.
Well, grief is our response to loss, and it's normal, it's inevitable, and it's a natural part of our life. And it can affect every part of our life. It's different for everybody, and how it affects you.
I've heard often that there are different phases of grief, and all these different models trying to describe it. But I suppose one of the things is some people are better at managing it than others.
Well, we don't know. People will respond in different ways, but in regards to how people react, people can react in a variety of ways. Numbness, anger, disbelief, sadness. From a psychological perspective, we talk about a stress reaction, and that can last for up to 6 weeks. And that's a normal reaction that people have, and in some ways it's like the mind. The mind will just sort of close down, and it's a way of protecting yourself. So it's shock and disbelief could be a part of this. But that's the way that that we adjust to such a grieving situation.
Through the course of our work, we find people, some are clearly distressed, others, you wouldn't really know how they feel. Are there any clues to evaluate what the sort of response to them might be?
Well, let's look at the physical side of things, coming back to what I was saying about the grieving. People might have problems sleeping, it might affect their appetite, it might affect their ability to concentrate. These are all normal reactions. There are a whole variety of other reactions as well, and I think you've listed those on your website. But it is understanding that's appropriate and that people move through that. If people are stuck, or if you were concerned about a loved one, you're thinking that they're not coping well, I think that's where you could be looking at talking to them, or maybe even recommending that they go and see somebody to get some help. And that could be, once again, going and seeing their doctor as the first port of call, or seeing a mental health professional like a psychologist or a psychotherapist or a counsellor.
When you're dealing with a deceased relative's estate, the process of probate comes at a time when you're experiencing grief. It's quite an arduous process. What advice, if someone is finding it particularly hard and they're having to deal with probate and deal with this difficult process, just to manage that, to help them through?
Well, you can also add to the stresses that they might be holding down a job, and they're a member of a family, and they've got other responsibilities and roles to fulfill. I suppose the thing about grieving is that it just doesn't affect the person who you've identified who might be having to deal with the estate and with the probate, but it'll be affecting the family. So everybody is going to be affected by this. So I suppose from my perspective looking on would be to say, how can you be gentle to yourself? How can you actually create some space to just be checking both with yourself, how you're making sense of it, but also with your loved ones as well, as to that you don't close them out, that at this particular time that you're getting support, you're getting the love, and you're getting some nurturing from people that matter.
Yeah, I think that's really important advice. I remember one instance where a client was doing present during the house clearance, going through the stuff, and she found a load of her drawings she'd done as a child, kept in a sort of special box by her mother's bedside, and she actually opened up to me and said she had no idea, and she's very moved by this.
What you're saying is it's got to affect you. You can go in and be practical and deal with the stuff that needs to be done, but it's got to affect you on an emotional level. You're in this sort of situation, you're getting to see, as you've identified, maybe areas or aspects of a loved one that you weren't aware of, and how do you slow it down so you've got time to process it? And part of that is maybe it's making a decision. Who can you talk to? How can you unpack this? How can you have that space to actually to make sense of it?
Very often when families are dealing with an estate, in this case, it's all fine and they're a close-knit family, but sometimes you might have siblings that maybe never got on, grew apart, and it seems to be a real avenue for problems along those sort of areas, whether it's rowing over the possessions or what to do at any level. And it's almost like sometimes old rivalries resurface. Is there any advice that you could give people that are dealing with family members that perhaps they don't get on with so well? How to cope in that situation?
That's a good question, but I don't know. Something like that, death is going to affect different people in different ways. As an event, if there is, I suppose it's interesting, like any sort of traumatic or critical event, it can either bring people closer together or it can push them apart. And as you're saying, if there is animosity or if there's acrimony over that predates this, yeah, I think that it's going to be emotionally charged. I mean, in regards to how do you keep things on a level playing field, how do you deal with strong emotion, whether you can have a third party to help with mediation, or coming back to what you were saying earlier about maybe another family member who's not so personally involved, it's opening it up. Who are the stakeholders? Who can you access that could help to take the emotional heat out? But if we come back to timing again, if it's within a short space of time, it's going to be a hot potato. Let's say that. So yes, it's just being aware that that's perfectly normal as well.
Mark, thanks so much once again for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thanks, Rufus.